Welcome to hour number 2 on a Friday on hashtag Daily K with your host, Peter Bint. Today we have a very special edition of Dish of the Day with Chef Ryan on board on the video link up. We're going to get him on the screen in just a second. Let's see if he can hear us all clear. Good morning, Chef Ryan.
Hey, good morning, Peter. How are you today?
You are right in the midst of cooking, I see, over at where? You're wearing a green t-shirt.
Yeah. I feel honored to be here representing Brazil in the Brazilian Embassy at the Kintex Soul Food and Hotel kind of expo here this week.
Fantastic. Ryan, do not cut yourself while grating that cheese. You seem to be incredibly busy at the food expo. I did see adverts for that. I was driving to Ilsan on Wednesday. It was a bit odd because Ilsan is not in Seoul, but it is the Seoul Expo at the Kintex rather than the COEX. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan. We missed you last week. We're missing you in the seat next to me as well today.
Sorry, guys. When I was a kid, I lived in Brazil for a couple of years. And it had such a profound effect on me that to be able to be here and represent Brazil in the Brazilian Embassy and make Brazilian food this week, I just couldn't pass up the opportunity.
No.
So and it's really cool. Right now I'm grating cheese from the Netherlands. Across from us here is a booth from the Netherlands. And we've made friends this week. And instead of using our cheese to make these Brazilian pastel and other things, they shared their cheese with us, and so we're making some fusion food here at the Kintex today.
You're making the magic happen, Ryan. That is amazing. I'm sure our listeners are appreciating it. Looking at the chat right now, says Leon from Singapore. Omo, Chef Ryan is still cooking while he's talking on the Zoom. That is multitasking. It is unbelievable, Ryan.
Well, exactly like what we do with Daily K and our segment every week, promoting or at least educating folks on Korean products and Korean foods. That's kind of what we're doing here this week for Brazil. Yeah. And like I said, living down there when I was 16, 15, and then again in college, I just really fell in love with that place. And it's been so nice to speak Portuguese all week with these amazing people and make these foods and share them with folks from all over the world here.
This is fantastic. This is actually something maybe we should do more often, to see you in action in the kitchen. I'm sure you could do without the stress while you're cooking there. I wonder, what are some of the highlights? Can you give us a little rundown of what you're preparing there on a daily basis? Today's the final day of the festival. What did you say earlier the cheese is going into?
Pastel. If you guys are on the video link, I can give you a little show here.
It's amazing.
So, yeah, we're shelling out about 200 or 300 of these little plates every day. Wow. And then in the oven, I've got one of my favorite things. And if my family's watching now, they all know what I'm about to say. Pão de queijo is a cheese bread, but it's actually, rather than using flour, they use a yucca root that's dried and ground into a flour. And they're so good. When I lived in Brazil, I used to eat like 20 of these things a day. Wow. And we can't get that kind of flour here in Korea. It's not imported yet. So this is the first time I've been able to eat them in like 20 years. And I've already eaten about 50 this week. Wow. And I've got another 50 coming out of the oven here underneath me in about 2 or 3 minutes. You guys might get to see those in a second too.
You are going to give them to people there. They're not just going to be all in your belly, right?
That's a good question. Yeah, myself and the other Brazilian folks here working the stand for the Brazilian Embassy, we are enjoying a lot of the Brazilian coffee, the pastel. We do get first dibs, but we are happy to share with everybody as well.
Fantastic. And Ryan, I don't know if you know, because you're working there, but is this for anyone can go and if they buy tickets to enter and see foods from all around the world?
All this week, you did have to buy tickets, but this is the last day. So today it's free for anybody who wants to come in which is why we're looking like it's going to get real busy here after a bit. Probably around lunchtime, it'll get really crazy. Right now, it's still a little early.
Okay. And what, are you guys selling the food, or is it just like complimentarily given out to people?
Complimentary, courtesy of the Brazilian embassy
Oh.
and the companies that are, trying to import their products. They've supplied us with a lot of the Brazilian pork that we're serving today. Yeah. And then we were, myself and a Brazilian friend who has a restaurant in Suwon. We joined up together to do the food and beverage for this event.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. I can kind of show you guys a little bit here real quick.
Yeah, we'd
Just how
love to
busy
see.
it is already
So is it just foods from around the world, or it's like Korean foods as well there?
I don't believe there are any Korean stands so much here as
Ah.
it is. It is international partners attempting to find Korean partners to purchase
Aha.
their products from abroad. So right
Wow.
around me, I can see the Netherlands, I can see Malaysia. We've got Indonesia here, we've got Peru, we've got Turkey, and that's just right here in my general vicinity. As you can see way back, I mean, this is a huge convention center here in Ilsan,
Uh-huh.
just kind of west or northwest of Seoul. So
Wow. This
it's
is
been fun and busy.
this is great fun. This is way better than I was expecting, that we can see everything out there. Ryan, thank you so much for showing us. And thank you for still joining us despite being incredibly busy today. We are almost at the end of section number 1, so we better at least say what we're going to be talking about today. Why don't I read the message from Will in Canada to set us up here? Will said, if possible, on Friday's cooking segment, could you please touch on the making of rice porridge, chug? I bought 2 different kinds of rice porridge with abalone and I fell in love with it. I would love to know how to make it to save some money, please, and thank you for your consideration, Will. So I guess today, after a song break, we can talk about chuk and porridge in general, maybe different versions around the world, and then focus in onto abalone porridge. Would you say that Korea's like porridge game is different or more diverse than other places? How does it rank in your thinking?
Well, I think it's definitely better than in the way most people think of porridge
Yeah.
around the world. When my folks came to visit Korea the first time, my dad saw a sign that said, and I don't know if everybody knows, my dad was adopted from Korea, and when he
Hmm.
was a little kid in the orphanage, we don't know exactly what they fed him, but he used to joke that he was fed gruel or porridge, when he was a
Uh-huh.
kid. And then he saw it on a sign. The translation said porridge and said gruel, and we
Oh
were like,
dear.
"Oh no, that's not a pretty way to picture it." But I got to say that Korean juke is much of a step above of what people normally, at least in my home country of the States, think of as porridge. It's
Yeah.
so much better, and especially abalone porridge, because abalone is like a food for kings.
Hmm.
If you haven't tried that, you really got to give it a taste. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to help people go through a recipe, and we'll figure that out here a little bit later today.
Fantastic.
Now,
All about Korea.
Arirang Radio.
We've got lots of feedback on the topic of chuk as well, which you could translate into porridge, I suppose. Adrian has got on board from the Philippines saying kongji. I've heard that term kongji,
Right.
with Chinese cuisine. Is that pretty much the same as our chuk, which is very much rice-based?
Yeah, it's very similar, but I think that juke has a place of its own in the culinary world.
Hmm.
There's so many different kinds. I don't think we've talked about yet today how it is such a go-to if you're not feeling very well.
Yeah.
You always find juke restaurants on the ground floors or nearby hospitals in
Yes.
Korea. And it really is kind of like the chicken noodle soup of Korea.
Mm.
And I totally understand why. It's good for you. There are variations of it that are very simple, not too heavily seasoned. So you can get that sustenance without upsetting your stomach.
Yeah.
But then there's things like the abalone juke or the nakshi, the baby octopus juke. Those are some of my favorites. There's such strong flavors in there, and like a creamy risotto There's something really special about a creamy risotto. And jute kind of gets towards that area. I mean, of course, you don't have the cheese, but a lot of a risotto is not about the cheese. It's about the starches in the rice. And definitely, Korea, most people must know that Korea has some of the best rice in the world. That short grain, really, really good, slow releasing starch rice that was grown in just perfect conditions.
Yeah, and you're really right to highlight that aspect of it, the chicken noodle soup kind of properties of eating it when you're feeling sick or after a colonoscopy or an endoscopy I talked about earlier. They'll often even give you a free voucher at the hospital to go and eat it. And when you're really feeling sick, they do say, and my wife often cooks it for our kids when they're feeling totally under the weather or they've had some food poisoning, just white rice and nothing else. And then you put in maybe a tiny bit of soy sauce, maybe a little bit of sesame oil if you're feeling like you're getting better. And then the other one is, I think it's myeum is maybe what you call it or something like that, where it's not even the rice, it's just the boiled liquid that you'll drain off because you really can't deal with digesting anything solid. And that I've had that when I was super sick from my mum, and at least gives you some kind of carbs to get through the day when you're feeling proper sick. And we had Silver Granny comment, I'm thinking of oatmeal when I hear the word porridge. And I guess, in the West, we're not talking about rice porridge in the UK or in the States. But here when we say chuk, it's not wheat or oats or anything, right?
Right. It's not maltomeal. It's not oatmeal. It's from rice, from short grain rice.
Yeah.
That releases a lot of starch when you boil it. Essentially, what we're talking about is a rice that's cooked with twice as much water as you normally would use, and then really boil it.
Okay.
Boil it for a good 10 minutes, and then you can reduce the heat and simmer it for maybe as long as another 30 minutes. And that releases all that starch and makes it into a porridge.
And so, Ryan, when we do it at home, when I say we, my wife always does the chuk when my kids are ill. She will use the rice that's in the rice cooker, right? So it's already been cooked, and then she'll just put it into a pot with some extra water, and it just seems to boil down. And from what I can see, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be precise with the times or anything. It's all getting quite gloopy and sloshy. Is it best if you want to get a good chuk to cook it from like a raw rice?
I think so. And honestly, what I would do is look for an organic short grain rice. And then you don't have to wash it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you wash it, you're washing away so much of that starch. And that starch is what, makes a great risotto or would make like a really, really creamy jus.
That's what you want.
You know
because,
what I mean?
With all the rice that we have in Korea, the mass-produced and mass-sold ones, I wash it like 3 times. That's what I've been taught before I cook it. Yeah. But you want to get as much, because you're really washing away a lot of thick, like creamy liquid from that, right? And that's essential in the porridge.
And back in the day, before people were using herbicides and pesticides, nobody washed their rice that much.
Oh, wow.
Or no, I'm sorry. I'll take that back. They did wash it, but they didn't throw that water away.
You would use
that water was too valuable to be used in maybe a chige or isn't it the traditional way to start a doenjang chige is to use that rice water, and it acts as a thickener and it's sustenance that back in the day when people didn't have too much, you don't throw away anything. So now we have to, because it's got herbicides and pesticides on it, and you got to be sure and watch it. But there are plenty of organic rices out there available. And every time I teach a risotto class or a jute class, I would definitely go for an organic short grain rice.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think the other way that people still can use that rice water, where you're not ingesting it, but you're making use of it. Some people swear by washing their face in it for properties of skin healing and stuff. It does feel like it's doing something for your moisture and whatnot. And in terms of this as a culture aspect, one of my wife's best friends actually owns a couple of franchises of the famous chuk restaurant, which just has a pon in front of it. It's very universal. And she, on her menu, and that's the one we go to the most, There are so many options. There's something for everyone. As Ryan said earlier, the exotic seafood ones like the nakji and the abalone, the nakji being the octopus. But there's also like chicken ones. There's yachejuk with the vegetables. There's the sogogijuk with the beef in it. There's literally every type. And even if you're thinking, oh, this sounds so plain and boring, the spicy juks are great for me and my wife when we're going there because the kids love juk, to be honest. It's something that wins them over every time. But we can get the spicy versions, which are kind of orangey red, and they're really nice. They've got a real kick to them as well.
I love them all, Peter, I really do. and if anytime I've been under the weather, Korean friends often would bring juk to me from a nice restaurant as like a, hey, get well soon kind of thing. And it has that heartwarming effect. Often a winter time thing,
Of course.
Obviously porridge. But yeah, definitely the one that we want to focus on today, the abalone, is the most expensive, the most highly prized. The restaurants often they'll have juk on the menu that it's only about 6,000 or 7,000 won. And then they have the abalone juk that is maybe 25 or 30,000 won.
Yeah,
right.
If you go into the good places, for sure.
Music that you wanna dance to. Arirang Radio.
Adrian says, I wonder if stirring the porridge will help it cook. Do you just leave it in the pot there for what, like you said, half an hour or 10 minutes or whatever it may be?
Well, let's run through it a little bit.
Okay.
Usually you'll start with sesame oil, okay? Toasted sesame oil. And then you'll usually get in some kind of onion. It could be spring onions or it could be just a regular old onion chopped up finely. So in that sense, you're starting off just like a risotto, right?
Okay.
Then the next thing you add is if you're doing an abalone juk, what I would do is take the nejang, the funky different bits, the innards that are underneath the actual abalone.
Yeah.
I would take that and maybe throw it in a blender or mortar and pestle and or just chop it up and get that flavor in there. And I know a lot of people cringe. A lot of people might cringe at that idea, but that's how you really get this nice deep flavor and the traditional color of an abalone juk.
The kind of greeny.
Without that,
yeah,
exactly. Without that, you're not going to get the real deal. So sadly, if you guys go out and find like frozen abalone, they're not going to come with the intestines or the other parts underneath there. You're really going to need to find fresh ones to be able to pull this off.
Yeah.
But that would be the next thing that would go in the pot after you soften up the onions, maybe some garlic as well. Then you would throw in those nasty bits, if you will, those other parts, and stir that around, cook that very well, and then next would go in your rice. And this is rice that, like you were saying, Peter, it might be rice that's already cooked, but I would definitely recommend getting an organic short grain rice and then not even washing it. If it's not an organic rice or a pesticide-free rice, then you do need to wash it well and then soak the rice for at least an hour or two and then drain it and then throw that rice in. Okay. And again, this is still very online with a risotto.
Yeah.
Your risotto, you've really got to get an oil coating on the rice before you get going. And juk, you don't necessarily have to do that, but you want to get the flavors of the onion, the garlic, and the abalone into that rice before you start adding water.
Okay. And then you're adding an ample amount of water.
Right. Well, actually, first I would go ahead and throw in my abalone.
Yeah.
And normally that's sliced thinly or diced up and add it in and stir that a bit. And then, yes, once you feel like that those flavors of all those ingredients have gotten onto that rice, then you add in 3-to-1 water. So if you've got 2 cups of rice, then you're going 6 cups of water.
Oh, wow.
Something like that.
Okay.
Bring it up to a boil and let it boil for 10 minutes. And this is where we separate from Western cuisine. Normally we simmer things in Western cuisine and here in Korea to really get that starch going and break it down quickly. I think that's a lot of it is time and energy and using a fire, to heat stuff up. You've got a lot of fire and then you don't have fire. And rather than trying to keep a low flame for a long time, I think back in the day in Korea, it needed to be done fast, to feed people. And so, yeah, you boil it for 10 minutes. That releases a whole lot of the starch, but it'll really thicken up in the next stage where you reduce the heat down a bit and then let it go for another maybe 15, 20, even 30 minutes, depending on how long it takes for it to thicken up some more. What you're looking for is the consistency of, well, definitely not as thick as an oatmeal kind of porridge.
No way.
It's still kind of a little bit soupy, but much thinner than a risotto. Even when we teach risotto, we always say that when you put it on the plate, it should slowly fall down onto the plate. So you plate it and you kind of shake the plate and then it slowly goes down and forms kind of a disc, right? Yeah. Porridge or Korean juk, on the other hand, you don't ever serve it on a plate. No. It's got to be in a bowl because otherwise it would go flat pretty quick.
You would struggle to scoop it up. Yeah. Wow, that is a brilliant step-by-step recipe. One thing that we maybe didn't focus on enough, because for Koreans, the abalone, the jeonbok, is an ingredient that everyone knows about. But in the West, even in English, I think many people don't know. And Meg was like, what on earth is abalone?
Well, Meg, we've got a good trick for you then. Thanks to Arirang TV, you can go on YouTube and you can search K-Fish, Arirang TV K-Fish, and you'll see my goofy face. And there's a bunch of different clips, and some of them are of me and Wando with the Arirang TV team cooking with. I made a ceviche with it, but also good descriptions of what abalone is and how it's raised and how it's farmed in Korea and just how delicious it is. Yeah. So you can have a laugh at my expense if you watch this. But I love that experience. I got to eat so many abalone on a farm raft out in the sea on the southern coast of South Korea.
Wow!
And that's when I learned how good the nejang or the innard parts are of the female abalone.
Oh, really? They're different.
Thing too. Yeah, if you look underneath the part that most people eat more regularly, and you look at the intestines part down there, if it's blue greenish, that's a female, and if it's more tan white, that's a male. And the female abalone, the blue greenish ones coming out of the sea, that just raw. At first, when they said you can eat it raw, I was like, I don't know. But I'm standing on a raft and the cameras are rolling, and I'm like, I got to try it.
Sure.
And I'm so glad I did because it's one of the best things I've ever tasted.
Wow.
And that led to me. That led to me eating probably 20 or 30 of these that day. And since then, I've tried them in the markets. And it's just not the same because they've been in a fish tank for a little while.
Sure.
And they just don't have the same freshness to it. So if you get a chance to get some natural, farmed in the sea or wild abalone, definitely don't just throw those bits away. Put it in a juk at least. If you're scared to eat it raw, put it in a juk.
That's the advice for today. Ryan, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for being able to speak with us whilst being so busy. Have a great final day up at the expo, and we'll see you in the flesh next Friday.
Wonderful. Thanks. Goodbye, everybody. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for putting up with me. I'll be back in the studio next week. I promise.
You can listen to Dish of the Day with Chef Ryan every Friday at 10 a.m. KST on #DailyK.